Show us the way of compassion, the way of joy and peace. Show us the way of life. Lost in the midst of such devastatingly bad news, shaking our heads in disbelief, cursing the stupidity of our neighbours, shrugging our shoulders, despairing that much of anything can be done to help the pain, clenching our fists in anger or weeping, just weeping. War is raging. Weapons are brandished, waved, fired, and clung to. We are lost. As the anger rose, seeking a way out of the deepening despair, I remembered the wisdom of our ancestors who knew all too well the pain of weapons fired indiscriminately in their direction, inflicting wounds which even now resist healing. I first learned of the tale of the two wolves from an elder woman of the Coast Salish people who told us, a group of privileged white students, that she learned this wisdom from a settler who learned it from her white mother, who learned it from a Cherokee. As Chief Sheila told it to us, it was a grandmother who told her granddaughter about the two wolves which struggled within her. The evil, angry wolf battling a good, compassionate wolf, the battle which rages over and over again in each of us. Which wolf will win? Wisdom insists that it is the wolf that we feed. This wolf will win in us. Today, in what has been described as hot mess times, the wolves are struggling within me, and they go by the names of despair and hope. Despair and hope, struggling to win my allegiance. Day after day, despair and hope. Which one shall win? Let us look to the wisdom of our ancestor Jesus, as it is recorded by the anonymous gospel storyteller we know as Luke, reading from the First Nations version. Jesus said, "Healthy trees give good fruit, and rotten trees give bad fruit. Do grapes come from a thorn bush or figs from thistles? The human heart is like a medicine pouch. Good-hearted people speak from the good medicine stored in their hearts. Bad-hearted people speak from the bad medicine stored in their hearts. For the mouth will speak what the heart is filled with. How is it that you call me great chief, but do not walk in my ways?" My home is located in a new subdivision built in 2000 on the traditional lands of the Chippewas of Georgina. Once the houses were built, the town planted young trees all up and down the streets. And by the time we moved in 2006, the tree in our yard was already dying. Eventually, the town replaced it with a new young tree, which looked so fragile in the presence of all the other bigger, more developed trees on our street. I despaired of our little tree's chance for survival. And the town left us with strict instructions about watering and fertilizing our little baby tree. And I didn't put much store in my ability to keep the young tree alive, but I dutifully watered, probably sometimes overwatered, and I fed our spindly little tree, hoping against hope that it would survive. About a month ago, the town removed all the trees from our street, except for 2. Only 2 trees were spared because they are the only 2 trees on our street which aren't mountain ash. which are being ravaged by a fire blight. And so they're removing all the mountain ash. Now, the tree in our yard is one of the 2 trees left on our street. Not only has it survived, it is thriving. That tree continues to mature and now stands tall upon our street. And I continue to feed it and to water it. I know, it's just a tree. And as evocative as a parable about dueling wolves may be, children are dying, and they will continue to die. Despair and hope. How can we dare to hope? Show us the way. Show us the way of compassion. I wish I knew the answers. I don't. But I don't want to insult your intelligence by offering you some false hope. Despair, deep, paralyzing despair, is the only intelligent response to the plethora of tragic news which keeps hitting us in wave after wave. I feel very much like the tree in our front yard during last week's windstorm, battered and bent to the point of snapping. I'm angry, and I find myself cursing the perpetrators of violence. Not just the pitiful losers who perpetrate violence against the innocent with assault weapons, but the perpetrators of the war in Ukraine, the perpetrators of violence against our beloved earth, the corporate raiders perpetrating larceny, the racists, rapists, and violent so-and-sos who perpetrate violence upon the weak just to make themselves feel better. I could go on, but then I too become an ally of despair, feeding the raging wolf within me and within you, I suspect. The human heart is like a medicine pouch. Good-hearted people speak from the good medicine stored in their hearts. Bad-hearted people speak from the bad medicine stored in their hearts. For the mouth will speak what the heart is filled with. So I stare longingly at tall, strong, steadfast trees determined to feed hope, struggling to survive in me. I'm told that each and every day, we modern, tuned-in, connected, privileged North Americans, we are exposed to more bad news in a day than our parents had to cope with in a month. Now, I'm not sure if that's true. I suspect that the truth is worse than that. I know it feels that way. It feels like a day brings more bad news than we would have been exposed to in a year before technology became so adept at sending us bad news. The reality that bad news travels fast is now amplified by our own temptations to spread it. We have become gossip mongers. Try as we might, we cannot control the volume of tragic news which inundates us. We cannot control what is happening in the world, but we can control how we respond to the news. For we are good-hearted people, and we do indeed have so much good medicine stored up in our hearts. We have blessings beyond the wildest dreams of our ancestors. When bad news reaches us, we are privileged enough to make a choice. We can feed the wolf of despair, or we can reach into our hearts, which are filled with good medicine, and we can feed the wolf of hope. Now, I'm not talking about Pollyanna, pie-in-the-sky, wishy-washy hope, the kind of hope which will make people want to smack us. I'm talking about the kind of hope born when we begin to feed hope. For hope, real hope, requires, no, demands action. Action is the food necessary for hope to thrive. Despair feeds upon inaction. There's nothing we can do. Nothing's going to change. The problem's too big. Despair feeds upon inaction. When good people do nothing, despair thrives. I know. Hope appears to be starving right now. Hope's appetite for action is overwhelming. But if each one of us who is blessed with a morsel offers ourselves as acts, it will be like those old potlucks we used to have in the before COVID times when feasts of love appeared out of nowhere. And those of us who have hope, our actions will feed the hope in those who have lost theirs. There is so very much we can do. And it begins by not magnifying the bad news. Shaking our heads, tut-tutting, complaining, moaning, groaning, pointing fingers, insisting that there is nothing we can do is food for despair, and that wolf will eat us alive. Hope hungers for us to dry our tears, rack our brains, figure things out, access our compassion, reach out, take risks, be prepared to fail sometimes, and then dust ourselves off and encourage one another and help those who feel helpless so that together we can embody the love our world hungers for. Action feeds hope. It's said that when things were particularly bleak and people were paralyzed by despair, Martin Luther insisted that even if he knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, he would still plant his apple tree. Now, the despairing wolves among us would point out that there's no proof whatsoever that Martin Luther actually said this. But in these hot mess times, I choose to feed the wolf of hope by insisting that I don't much care whether Luther said it or not. For just like good old Martin himself would say, I choose to live my life as if it is all true. I choose to feed hope. So I'm happy to tell you that the 2 lonely trees on my street will soon be joined by a street full of new, young, spindly, fragile little trees, which our town assures us will grow strong if we feed and water them. May everyone who meets you discover in you a good-hearted person who speaks a word of hope, drawn from the plethora of good medicine stored in your hearts. Choose to feed hope. Feed hope with action. Gather together the morsels of wisdom which we have been blessed, and give them away. Add a dash of treasured spice to your wild and crazy ideas, and summon up your compassion. And if you have to, even if it's through tear-filled eyes, see your way clear to act. Feed hope, choose hope, be hope. Amen.